I am Val, and I have forgotten my key cards. Jim, would you be ever so kind? Perfect start. Thank you very much. My lightning talk, I decided to center it around this idea of art done by machine. And it's a topic which has been broached as an idea for many decades now, but it's really been only in the last few years to a decade where we've had the computational power to really do something quite unprecedented through machines. So I decided to sink into the rabbit hole that is artwork produced by machines. Let's start with a brief discussion of what art actually is. I've put a couple of definitions on this slide, and I want to highlight a few bits that made an impression on me. The first one is just from a quick Google search, literally typed what is art into Google, and this is what it came up. And it made an impression on me on how the expression or application of human creative skill. So Google specifically highlights that for art to be counted as art, it has to come from a human. Now, that poses to me the question, does that mean that machines can have their own creative skills and imagination, but that does not count as art in and of itself? And afterwards, I dug a little bit deeper around this idea of defining what art is, and things didn't become exactly clearer. I went to Oxford Dictionary for some inspiration, and we had on there's probably about 20 different definitions of it. I've included the first meaning and the seventh one. So here in the first one, the emphasis is very much on expressing the need to express, or the imagination to express feelings, in particularly in painting, drawing and sculpture. The seventh one I found really quite interesting, which is the ability or a skill that you can develop through training and practice. And within a lifetime, there is only so much training and practice that a human can do, and compared to what an AI can learn within even minutes of analyzing previous artworks and so on. So defining things doesn't entirely make things clearer. So let's try and break things down. There's a few different types of art that I would like to mention as I was digging around. This concept of different kinds of arts has originated since the dawn of humanity, and I've included here an artwork of the 9 muses within Greek mythology, and the definitions of how many arts there are vary depending on who you ask. For example, Encyclopedia Britannica says that there are 9, says that there's 8, but some other sources say that there's 7, even 10, and so on. These are some of the ones which I've listed on this slide here, have been agreed for most of them, and I want to highlight how graphic arts has now been defined as its own right, not only as a subsection of visual art. So that was quite interesting for me. I've included a couple of images here. The first one is a rehearsal for the performance art Carmen by Opera North that's coming to Leeds in October. And the second image is of architecture, art as architecture from the Leeds Central Library. So art can be really rather varied. There's some modern types of art that have come about in the last decade or so. And the image that I've included here, I do apologize if it makes you a little bit uncomfortable once you know what that is. This is a magnification of a Petri dish, and the artwork is done through microbes and bacteria. Different kinds of yeasts are also known to produce beautiful colors, depending on what kind of chemicals are injected into them. And I have like I said, this is a multi-layered and very varied rabbit hole of artwork that I have stumbled into. There's been all sorts of really, really interesting things happening within the sphere of bioart. There's also, I wanted to highlight, futuristic art, which centers around specifically recycling old electronics and machinery, as well as light painting and kinetic art, or which specifically focus on moving installations. So it's not something passive as a painting where you go and look at it and it's pretty much the same from every angle. Depending on the angle that you take, or the artwork itself might move. Now, jumping into more specifically art that can be done by machines, or where machines certainly have a much bigger impact on the finished piece, I wanted to maybe start with something a little bit more traditional, like what you might think originally. And I'm going to include the name of the human author, as well as the name of the machinery which has produced the artwork, and the different type of projects and certain discussion points that can be made around those. I wanted to highlight first Damien Borowick, who has created the drawing machine. And it is this machine that presents like quite a big metallic frame and a pencil or a pen, which are mediums traditionally used by artists, are plugged into the frame, and then the frame moves at a particular pace, at a particular rhythm, and it creates the most satisfying straight lines and corners. Not even holding the shift key on a digital application brings such satisfaction of seeing this machine in action. And this, the drawing machine itself has been commissioned by companies of the caliber of Samsung, Dior, and BBC to create artworks for different advertisements and different projects that they've been working on. So moving on, I had to include this one. The collective Obvious has, which is the three people that I've listed on the screen, has trained up this AI. The signature of it you can see just beneath the painting, which has become the most famous artwork it has created. It is the portrait of Edmond de Bellamy, which was sold for $432,500 at an auction a couple of years ago. And this artwork was created after the AI had studied 15,000 images on WikiArts of portraits of men. I would like to say men within Western Europe, from the 14th century to the 19th century, and then it had a go at making at least one version of it on its own. And this was the outcome. And the predictions for this for the sale price of this artwork was between 8,000 and 10,000, and people were already saying at the time, no, that is way too high, it doesn't look much like, it's just so blurry, and then the whole thing blew up. So I really had to include the Obvious Collective here because of the questions that their creation has posed. There's been a lot of controversy around it, not just because of the price of the artwork, but also because they were later on questioned on whether they were the developers and creators of the AI itself. That aside, I would like to highlight another visual artist, Pinar van Arman, and I hope I am pronouncing it relatively correctly. His machine, well, a series of machines and iterations of machines that he's been creating throughout the decades, firstly started off just as assistants, paint mixers, or just helpers to provide paints and provide like the more generic brushstrokes, which he's been interested in. But since then, I'm going to quote, "My machines have grown beyond being simple assistants and are now effectively augmenting my own creativity, as well as having creativity of their own. They have become a generative AI art system so sophisticated that it has forced me to consider the possibility that all of art is generative. And this creator, he has scripted the AI and the machinery that he is using himself. So from a mere assistant, he's now saying that he has to work around and perhaps even alter his own creativity around the creativity of the AI he's created. Another very collaborative project or duo, if we want to think about it in these terms, I want to speak a bit about Sougwen Chung, who takes turns to paint with her giant robot arm. And to me, this image really quite spoke to me because when I was growing up, I kind of grew up on all these films that speak about giant robots which are going to completely dwarf us and this post-apocalyptic universe. And here is Sougwen Chung having a painting session with this machinery, quite a few times her own size. And the artwork that they're working on is indeed a collaboration. The AI, which is controlling the robot arm, is responding both in color and form and placement of the brushstrokes to her own, and that affects her own brushstrokes, which then in turn inform the following paintwork by the AI. And they create quite abstract artwork, but there's a few more realistic pieces as well. Moving on from purely visual arts, I want to also highlight the work of Catie Cuan, and the two images that I have are from her website, from her project called Output, which was done in collaboration with ThoughtWorks just a few years ago, where this robot that you can see on the right-hand side is her dance partner. Catie Cuan is tracked through motion cameras. She is wearing a suit, so the contrast between her clothing and the background is quite important so that the AI can pick her motions and respond through movement, through light, through changing the song or the tune of it or the beat of it, and being quite an effective dance partner. And Catie Cuan has been creating these installations and choreographies with machinery, which I found really quite interesting, but she has been really heavily involved in the creation of the AI behind the robot itself. The final project, creator, human AI, I wanted to highlight, we will again end into a quote which I found really quite interesting. Holly Herndon is raising an AI as you would a child, and just reading on her personal page, I did find that she speaks of the Spawn AI as her child, which is being raised on a particular style of songs to then later on produce its own songs, including the background music as well as the voice. Now these are mimicked, well, not necessarily mimicked, but these are inspired by another artist, Julie's Laplace. And the song Godmother has been the one which has been highlighted as the ultimate creation of this Spawn AI through being raised on the songs from Julie's Laplace. But the song itself, now usually using AI is for a song or to generate music or to generate even voice is not necessarily something that is new. But what struck me as interesting here is the fact that the song Godmother was created from silence. So there was no direct input of edits or samples or overdubs as the as the AI was creating the song itself. And the quote I wanted to share with you is, I find something hopeful about the roughness of this piece of music. Amidst a lot of misleading AI hype, it communicates something honest about the state of this technology. It is still a baby. It is important to be cautious that we are not raising a monster. And that was quite an interesting one to me. I want to finally speak about intent. And I want to finish with another quote from Dylan Friedman, who is a researcher of AI-generated art at Google, who is saying that truly machine-generated art without any human intent behind the scenes doesn't exist as of yet. And that is indeed true. All the projects that I have found so far, a human not only has to script the AI, not only has to build the physical machine if one is needed, not only has to provide the samples and pick the topic and so on, a human still has to have the drive, the intent, the desire to create artwork. And so far, purely machine art does not exist because there is always a human who presses the play button. Thank you very much, and I am open for your questions.